we are all aware that Africa has some peculiarity when it comes to global political economy, and of course, when it comes to climate change. Africa is one of the least developed continents in the world, and development in terms of scientific, technological, and also economical uh, indices are very low, and that impacts virtually every other thing that has to do with human life and society. In terms of climate change, Africa, based on the fact that the level of its economic development is very low, contributes very marginally to greenhouse gas emissions, which has been identified as a major anthropogenic contributor to climate change. And of course, when we look at it beyond that, the fact that the impact of climate change is going to be disproportionate, not only in terms of the physical impact, like the floods, the drought, and all other physical and climatic responses, but also in terms of the ability and the widespread impact uh, this physical impact we also have, the ability to contain the physical impact. That is very low in Africa. Africa is going to be more impacted because it has low capacity to contain the impact, the physical impact. Aside the fact that the impact itself is going to be very much in Africa, but of course we are already seeing that in the recent period, especially in the last 1 year. In the last few weeks, so part of Nigeria where I'm based, the other part, saw a sharp rise in heat wave that saw temperature going as far as 45 degrees Celsius, and the local government had to even supply public water for people to take bath and relieve themselves because of the heat. And of course, given that the health sector in Africa is very has low capacity, and it's generally underdeveloped and underfunded, there will be several cases of heat-related and heat-wave-related diseases and ailments that would have come as a result of that. So that's just a snippet of what climate change is going to have in the coming period. Um, uh, and definitely, Africa should have a major stake or a major say in the question of the global climate change. Of course, I've identified that one of the solutions to stop climate change, the medium and long term, is to reduce the greenhouse gases, emission of greenhouse gases, and of course, the energy sector has been identified as a major source of the emissions of greenhouse gases. And if that is the case, it means that there's need to transit away from the polluting energy system, which is the fossil fuel, the oil, gas, and coal, uh, and transit to a renewable and cleaner source of energy, some of which include clean, green hydrogen, uh, solar, wind, and geothermal energy, and of course also the hydroelectric energy. Um, the fact is that currently in Africa, the level of energy supply is still very low. For instance, as much as 570 million Africans, which is about 54% of the population as of 2019, I mean, do not have access to electricity. That is an increase of about 150 million from what from the population of those who don't have access as at 2010. Between 2010 and 2019, what that means is that there has been an increase of about 150 million people who do not have access to the electricity. So it's the population of people who do not have access continue to be increased, even though the general population of Africans still has been increasing, which of course, if you look at the percentage, there will be it may look as if the percentage has reduced, but when you look at the numbers, it shows that there has been increase in the number of people who don't have the access to electricity. That's was 470 million people. I mean, also related to that also is access to clean cooking, because it's also very important to consider clean cooking, which is part of the energy system in Africa, because the majority part of Africa rely on the biomass, which include charcoal and wood products, mostly cut from their prime from the forest, for supply of energy for cooking, which aside contribute to deforestation and of course uh, burning of, of gases, and of course leading to emission and pollution. It also has terrible effect on the health of many African people. And the reality is that I mean clean cooking, which includes supply of uh, save sources of energy for cooking, including possibly biofuel or and, renewable energy like electricity that can be used for cooking. The supply of this clean cooking system is still very low in Africa, and with at least about 906 million Africa as of 2019 not having access to clean cooking. That's about 84% of the whole population. So when you look at it, it's a big problem, not only in terms of the fact that people are going to be using biomass, cutting trees, and deforesting, but also in terms of the health implication for even the people themselves, in terms of the inhaling dangerous substances from this people. So it's a big issue, and Africa has more at stake in terms of energy transition. Interestingly, Africa has a lot of resources to reach adequate level of renewable and clean energy supply. I mean, Africa, aside the fact that it has huge supply and huge potential of solar power. I mean, in various parts of Africa, you have the sun, you have the solar power that is very much. We have the also the capacity for to harness the wind. I mean, in Africa, virtually almost part of the continent, and of course, I mean, the water bodies in Africa are so much that I mean, same for the fact that there are also health challenges. I mean, there are also environmental challenges associated with hydropower supply, which has to do with cutting off communities from the existing water supply and all those things. I mean, hydropower is one of the major sources in which Africa can also harness. But the reality is that um, majority of hydro power station hydropower supply in Africa are from old hydropower dams that even pose danger to and risk to Africans. For instance, you have a situation in Libya recently, whereby there was a flood, and that flood could have had some casualties, but it was worsened by the collapse of a major dam. I mean that collapsed and led to huge flood that killed thousands of people, I mean, more than 9,000 or so, I mean, in that area. So, I mean, there is also the need to renew and rebuild the hydropower system. So, Africa has all these resources. And also, in terms of electric, I mean, supply, safe electric and clean electricity supply. Africa has some minerals that are very important for global supply of I mean, electric batteries, solar batteries, solar panels. I mean, like cobalt, like lithium. Africa has a huge supply, huge deposit of all many of these minerals, which are critical for uh, energy transition. So when you look at it in the broader sense, what you find out is that while Africa has capacity to develop its, to be a leading, I mean, a leading light for energy transition, the reality is that the continent, as a result of its underdevelopment, is not able to harness all the resources, and it has been at the tail. And when the effect of climate change comes, the continent is going to be a major victim of that. Aside the fact that the physical impact, the floods, the droughts, which are already creating a lot of problems now, they are going to worsen, and there is no capacity. Even the early warning systems like the meteorological services are still very in their rudimentary state in most part of Africa, and they are not adequate where they are even available. They are not adequate across the countries that we have in Africa. So this is the situation. But the bigger challenge also is the fact that there has been African economy is also depleted in fossil fuel. I mean, a certain number of African countries rely on supply of fossil fuel, oil and gas, and coal for not just their internal economy, for the internal economy, but also for generation of foreign exchange and revenue, government revenue. Nigeria, the biggest African economy, rely on fossil fuel for major supply of its foreign revenue. And also, look at South Africa. It also rely on coal for its industry. You also have countries like Libya, like Angola. They also rely on countries like Mozambique too. Which also rely on a lot of countries. But even those countries do not rely on fossil fuel. For foreign exchange, rely on do businesses with African countries that are that are fossil fuel that are fossil fuel economies. So if you look at it from this angle, you find out that I mean Africa is Africa transition to energy transition requires some serious effort beyond mere conferences and promises of some supply of little climate finance from some international donors or some developed countries. It requires a systematic approach in the sense that there is need for uh, African countries to organize how they are going to transit to clean energy in a way that's going to be beneficial to them. Beneficial in the sense that Africa has very low technological inputs into energy transition, while there is each supply, each potential and each deposit of minerals useful for energy transition in Africa. Africa's contribution to um, renewable technology is still very low. The whole of the research on renewable energy or the climate change is very low in Africa, so that Africa does not Africa's contribution to climate change research globally is less than 3%. And of course, most of the research on climate change in Africa are from outside the country. That is outside the continent. Most of the fundings for climate-related research for renewable energy research are directed to foreign institutions outside Africa that now conduct research for Africa. So that is, I mean, you can call it a new form of scientific, I mean, colonization. I mean, but that's the reality of grant. Also, in terms of the infrastructure of grant, I mean, Africa is still very rudimentary. So, I mean, if you look at it, if energy transition should take full form globally now, what they're going to see is that Africa is going to it's going to be another form, I mean, another place for renewable energy colonization. There's going to be another place for imperialist economic, economic imperialism, because it means that Africa will only serve as a source of uh, supply of raw materials for clean energy and renewable energy, and we also serve just as a market for the product that have been produced from outside the continent. They just bring the product. They will take I mean, the raw materials, I mean, and the potentials, while the continent will be importing renewable, I mean, energy products. That means that the continent will be giving out I mean, a lot of its resources at low cost with little value addition, while it will be importing finished I mean, products in terms of the renewable, I mean, product. And that will deepen the already terrible economic arrangement in Africa, which is what we have witnessed now, whereby Africa only supply the world with I mean, commodities and raw materials, I mean, with little or no value addition. I mean, and of course, it imports most of its I mean, products. Example is the Cote d'Ivoire, which exports more than 60% of what I mean, cocoa beans, but I mean, it's actually adding little to the cocoa, I mean, to the chocolate business of about 100 billion, I mean, dollars. I mean, and it imports most of the product associated with cocoa in the country. That will deepen African economic or development in terms of balance of trade, in terms of value of currency, in terms of the ability to raise enough resources to run the economy. So that is another aspect of the of the energy transition issue in Africa. The other aspect of it is that, I mean, fossil fuel economy is already creating problem for Africa.